Welcome back to Fight Fan. Today we're diving into part 3 of our history of the Heavyweight Championship. In this episode, we're taking on the true titans of boxing's golden age, from the dominance of Joe Louis to the legendary Rocky Marciano. We'll cover the champions who reshaped boxing and left a legacy that still packs a punch today. So lace up those gloves, smash that like button, and let's get ready to rumble. Alright, let's jump back in. Episode 2 ended with the Brown Bomber himself, Joe Louis, who had claimed the heavyweight title in 1937 by defeating James Braddock. Louis didn't just become a champion, he became a symbol. For 12 years, he dominated the ring, defending his title a record-breaking 25 times, a feat that's unmatched to this day. Though he had slow feet and his chin wasn't the best, Louis was known for his precision, speed of hand and powerful punch, qualities that made him nearly unstoppable. His fights became legendary, not only for his skill, but for the hope he brought to Americans during the Great Depression and World War II. His reign kicked off with a tough 15-round decision of a Tommy Farr in New York's Yankee Stadium before a crowd of 32,000 fans. On a side note, massive credit to Farr here. Up until this stage, British heavyweights were rightly regarded as being crap. They were all chinny, from Bombardier Billy Wells to Gunnar Moyer to Joe Beckett to Finn and Phil Scott. We'd been perpetually horizontal. That changed with a teak tough and highly skilled Welshman. After Louis had defeated Farr, he smashed Nathan Mann and Harry Thomas. Then came the big one. Joe squared off against the only man to have defeated him, former world champion, number 1 ranked contender, the German Max Schmeling. This 1938 rematch was more than just a fight. It was a clash of ideologies at a time of global tension, and Joe became an American hero as he rose to the occasion and brutally dispatched the German in 1 round. It was one of the most clinical and vicious performances in boxing history. Following this legendary triumph, Joe took to knocking out fighters who the newspapers at the time dubbed the Bums of the Month. Members of this club included Two-Tongue Tony Galento, who promised to murder the bum, but got murdered himself in 4 rounds. Chile's Arthur Goddard, who pushed Louis to a split decision, though Louis would win the rematch convincingly in 8 rounds. Al McCoy of New England, who was put down in 6 rounds. Clarence Red Behrman, who was beaten black and blue and stopped in 5 with body shot. Abe Simon, who took 13 rounds of punishment. Tony Musto, who was dubbed as the baby tank and was slowly rolled over in 8.5 rounds. Buddy Bear, the brother of former heavyweight champion Max, who was actually outscoring Joe before he was dropped in the 6th round. When Buddy's corner tried to stall at the start of the 7th round to get their man more recovery time, the referee disqualified him. There was also light heavyweight boss John Henry Lewis, who was smashed in 1 round. Johnny Paycheck, who got his card stamped in a round. And Lou Nova, who was sent into a supernova in 6. Perhaps the biggest and most memorable fight of Joe's reign was against light heavyweight boss Billy Conn. The fighters met on June 18th, 1941, in front of a crowd of 54,487 in the Polo Grounds in New York City. The fight turned out to be one of the greatest in boxing history. The light heavyweight boss promised a hit and run style against Louis, prompting Joe to respond, "He can run, but he can't hide." Following 12 intense rounds, Conn was getting the better of things. He was faster and more accurate. Louis was looking absolutely exhausted, and Conn was ahead on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards. But against the advice of his corner, Billy Conn continued to pressure Louis, looking for a knockout. And the Brown Bomber made the most of his opportunity, knocking Conn out with 2 seconds left in the 13th round. It had been an absolutely epic fight. It had also been a very close shave. But probably the closest Joe would come to defeat came when he fought the veteran Jersey Joe Walcott on December 5th, 1947. Louis was a 10-1 favourite, however Walcott knocked him down twice in the first 4 rounds and seemed to do enough to win the fight. The 15-round decision went to Louis, but the Madison Square Garden fans booed. However, Louis was an absolute master at rematches. He would convincingly KO Bear, Simon, Conn and Walcott in rematches, leaving absolutely no doubt of his superiority. One of the greatest heavies of all time, Louis, like a lot of fighters in this era, sadly lost a lot of his prime years due to World War II. The great champion retired in 1948. Sadly, the great champion wouldn't get to enjoy his retirement. During the war, Joe had boxed charity exhibitions for the armed forces. The IRS decided that Joe should have to pay taxes for these bouts. Faced with a $50,000 bill, the American hero was forced back in the ring, but more on that later. When Joe retired as champion in 1949, the heavyweight division was left with a huge void. Who would step up to take the mantle? There were several contenders, but the most notable was the Cincinnati Cobra, Ezard Charles. Ezard Charles was one of the most skilled technicians in boxing history, with a sharp mind for boxing, but he was only really a light heavyweight. Still, his skills had paid the bills, and Charles had beaten great men like Jimmy Bivens, Archie Moore, Elmer Ray, and Joey Maxim. He won the vacant title in 1949, outscoring Jersey Joe Walcott over 15 rounds, and held it for a solid 2 years. Although he wasn't as charismatic as Lewis, he was still one of the most technically gifted fighters of all time. His first 3 defenses all ended in stoppage, as he defeated Gus Lesnovich, Pat Valentino, and Fred Beshaw, before squaring off against the returning Lewis. Charles, history would have you believe, dominated the faded Lewis, but it was actually a really tough fight, but Charles won a wide decision on the card. 4 more successful defenses would follow against Nick Barone, Walcott in a rematch, Lee Omer, and the new light heavyweight boss, Joey Maxim. However, his second victory over Walcott had been debatable, so the pair met for a third time in 1951. It was also the 4th time that Joe had fought for the world title. At 37, Jersey Joe was ancient by 1950s standards. However, the classy, flashy counterpuncher dominated the fight and knocked out Charles in the 7th round with a beautifully timed left hook to finally win the heavyweight championship. The veteran Walcott would make one defense of his championship, winning his 4th match against Ezard Charles by a highly debatable 15-round decision. And now we enter the Rocky Marciano era. In 1952, Marciano took on Jersey Joe Walcott for the heavyweight title, and this fight marked the beginning of one of boxing's most iconic reigns. Marciano's style was in stark contrast to the careful tactics of Charles and the classic counterpunching of Walcott. Marciano was all raw power, a relentless force willing to take a hit just to land one of his own. Marciano's climb to the top was fueled by brutal training and his unbreakable will. His right hand, which he christened Susie Q, could end a fight instantly. The unbeaten slugger had ended the career of Joe Louis in 8 rounds, but Walcott was confident that he could outbox the raw slugger, and he did just that. He dropped the incoming Marciano with a left hook in the first round, yet Marciano's resilience saw him through. By the 13th round, with Walcott ahead on 2 scorecards, Marciano needed a knockout to win, and that's exactly what he got. One punch changed everything. Marciano's devastating right hook sent Walcott collapsing against the ropes, marking one of the most unforgettable knockouts in boxing history. Marciano's dominant reign would go down in history. He defended the championship 6 times, including knocking out Roland Lastaza in 11 rounds, Walcott in 1 round in a rematch, or British champion Don Cockle, who he absolutely brutalised in 8 rounds. But his reign was probably most famed for his 2 intense bouts with former champion Ezard Charles. Marciano would win a close 15-round decision in their first back-and-forth war. In their second fight, Marciano sustained a serious cut on his nose, and fearful that the fight might be stopped, he went for a finish, knocking out Charles in the 8th round. Marciano's toughness and determination were simply unmatched. Then came the battle against light heavyweight legend Archie Moore in 1955. This would be Marciano's final defense, and the fight didn't disappoint. Moore, a skilled technician, knocked Marciano down in the 2nd round, but once again Rocky rose up to deliver a knockout in the 9th round, sealing his perfect record. Rocky Marciano retired in 1956 with an outstanding record of 49 wins, no losses. No one could touch his streak. 43 of his wins came by knockout. Marciano's career was brief but utterly dominant. The popular Italian-American's record remains a milestone that no heavyweight has been able to match. So that's the end of part 3, fight fans. From Joe Louis to Rocky Marciano, these champions defined the golden age of heavyweight boxing. But I want to hear from you. Who do you think was the greatest heavyweight of the era? Drop a comment below. And if you enjoyed part 3, hit the like button, subscribe to Fight Fan, and ring the bell for more stories from the legends of the sport. Until part 4, stay fierce, stay curious, and keep watching the legends. Thank you, fight fans.